I'm Charlie Rymer, and this is the Charlie Rymer Golf Show, powered by PlayGolfMyrtleBeach.com.
So I'm thrilled to be joined by my longtime buddy, Mark Mulvoy. And of course, Mark Mulvoy ran Sports Illustrated for years and years and years and years. Was the managing editor, also publisher. He was Sports Illustrated for a long, long time. And I first got to know Mark. You drew the short straw, and you got stuck with me as your professional at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. And would you just tell our viewers how you dealt with the pressure of getting paired with me as your professional partner at AT&T?
Well, the audiences were unbelievable. I think we had two people follow us one day when we played at, I guess we played at Cypress one year before they eliminated Cypress, which was a lot of fun. But, it was a lot of fun. I really remember a practice round we played in, I think we played twice, Charlie, and together. I had flown up from the Super Bowl in Phoenix on a charter the tour had canceled. I had bought a seat. You and I played with Tom Kites over at Poppy Hills, which put for the event that year. And I'll never forget, Kite shot probably 70, and he missed a 3-iron on one hole. You and I were bouncing it all over the place, and we finished. Tom said, "What are you going to do?" And you and I both said, "We're going to go have lunch." And Tom said, "Oh, I got to go hit 5,000 3-irons." But, it was always a great time. I remember you stayed at our house the week you played at the Westchester Classic one year. Mm-hmm. No, it's been a lot of fun. I remember taking you to Pine Valley that time, and you had your son there, and someone said to you later, I think it was Julian Saul said to you, how'd you like Pine Valley? He says, "God, the fishing there was really good."
I got my priorities, Mark. But it was fun because getting to know you and you mentioned staying at your house, and I did that a few years when we played at Westchester, the old Buick Classic on the PGA Tour, which, by the way, I think that was my favorite course on the PGA Tour. And one year you had one of your riders, Rick Lipsey, come out and caddy for me and do a story on caddying for me. And it was a short story because my week was only 36 holes.
Exactly. But you know what? Early on, he told his wife that he'd be free for the weekend, so I wasn't worried about that.
And I do remember that week you took me, you and your wife Trish, took me and my wife Carol to our first and only hockey game at Madison Square Garden. Right. And I think it was, and I know you're a big hockey guy, but it was Stanley Cup playoff game. I can't remember who they played, but my question to you was, so when is halftime? And I couldn't figure out that they didn't have a halftime, I didn't know much about the hockey, but they had awesome hot dogs at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. See, that's at the end of it, Charlie. You always rank sporting events and golf tournaments on the quality of the food, which is, I know, why you loved Colonial in Fort Worth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always enjoyed going to Cog Hill, the Western Open. They had wonderful pork chop sandwiches out there, and I was distracted when I played. That's why I didn't play for so long, Mark.
Well, you won your major championship at Buffalo, I believe, the USGA Juniors. Have you ever been back to Buffalo?
I haven't been, but I've been invited. And it's Brookfield Country Club, and my name is actually on the scorecard there. And they played, I believe it was 1951, they played the Western Open there. The Western Open is, I think, maybe the third oldest PGA Tour event. And it moved around all over the place. Ben Hogan won in 1951, so I'm on the same scorecard as Ben Hogan. So I got that going for me.
It's so great to be so close to greatness.
Exactly. Well, Mark, I appreciate you spending some time with us, and I've got a couple of serious questions for you. First and foremost, I'm here in Myrtle Beach as ambassador for golf in Myrtle Beach, and I grew up in South Carolina. It's a good fit for me. Work with great folks. I get to promote all our wonderful golf courses here. But a lot of folks don't know that Sports Illustrated actually started in Myrtle Beach. Will you share with me that story?
Well, it's a funny story, but at the golf course there, and I forget the name of it off the top of my head.
Pine Lakes.
Pine Lakes, no relation to Pine Tree, of course, Pine Valley. But they had an ad sales meeting for Time Magazine there. And one of the ad salesmen at Time Magazine, in the middle of a dinner, probably having had a couple of cocktails, looked over at Henry Luce and said, "We need a sports magazine." And that was back in 51 or 52, or whatever it might be. And Luce said, "Geez, what a great idea." He put together a task force, and they looked at it. And the first name they ever had, it was called Minorix, Mnorx. And anybody who was the editor or publisher of the magazine got cufflinks that said Minorix, because that was sort of the dummy name for the publication. Then the first issue came out in 1954. It happened to be on my 13th birthday, August 16th. And God, what a meteoric rise. I mean, in the first 4 or 5 years, there were a lot of stories about, chasing hounds and riding horses and fishing for some obscure fish in, Antarctica and things like that. But the great Andre Laguerre, who was the second editor of the magazine, and a Frenchman who was Charles de Gaulle's right-hand man before he joined Time Inc. in Paris, he came in and figured out that television was driving sports, particularly the NFL was becoming big on television and everything was on TV now. He changed the tone of the magazine from sort of a magazine for the hotty-toddy and the hooty-tooties, and really made it more of a hard sports publication with some of those stories alongside. But really, the success of the magazine evolved because Laguerre really went hard sports for the most part. And I know that it was followed by Roy Terrell for 5 or 6 years and Gilbert Rogan. And then when I took over the magazine, I guess in 1983, to me, what was going on at that time, the networks had all made big arrangements with all these sports leagues, and Brent Musburger came on television one day and said, we're now partners with the NFL. Well, that's all I needed, because I immediately announced and went public that our partners were the readers and nobody else. And we were able to really become pretty much the conscience of sports for a long time, because the networks and those people, they didn't do it because they were in bed with everybody. Mm-hmm. So that continued to evolve. We went from 1954, I don't know how many subscribers they had originally, but in 1987 and 1988, we had 3,400,000 subscribers. We read by 20 million people each week. And really, the Swimsuit Issue by itself, when I took over the magazine, it was like 8 pages, and I made it special issues and massive pages, and 2 pictures on the wall here of Elle Macpherson and Kathy Ireland thanking me for making their careers. I think they made their own careers. But the Swimsuit Issue was so successful, doing it once a year, that it made more money some years than Time Magazine made for the whole year.
But didn't that Swimsuit Issue come with some pretty sharp criticism from different quarters as well?
Oh, it did. And we used to get 4, 5, 6,000 letters from readers. We'd get about 10 letters from people who wanted to cancel the magazine, and a lot of them were Dean Smith, the late Dean Smith's wife, was behind a lot of those letters, And I said to Dean one time, I said, would you tell her to please calm down and what have you like that? I said, this is what happens. I said, you schedule lousy teams, and we have a swimsuit issue. You do certain things because of the bottom line, and But she was a nuisance to us in some ways. But let's face it, every kid, including you, no doubt, the minute that magazine arrived, you tucked it in your back pocket or you stuck it in your school books, and that's what you read at school the next day. You read as you're in bed at night.
I wouldn't say I read it, but I certainly had a good look at it, Mark.
Charlie, let's face it, we could have taken that magazine. We could have made that magazine Playboy or Penthouse. We could have done anything we wanted to do it. But I like to think, with my Jesuit upbringing and Catholic school education, I'll just put that. Actually, Mike Barnacle once called me because of the Swimsuit Issue, once wrote that I was the managing pimp of Sports Illustrated. But we toned it in such a way that it was not as explicit, certainly, as it could have been.
Well, you mentioned Elle Macpherson, Kathy Ireland. I can remember when we first met, talking to you about some of the shoots. I was very interested. You mentioned Phuket Island, Thailand. at one point. I'd never heard of Phuket. I'd barely heard of Thailand, and I had to go look that up. But I know you went to a lot of the shoots, exotic places around the whole planet. It had to be a lot of fun overseeing the magazine at that time.
Well, that was a 1 week a year thing, but it took us 6 or 7 weeks, and we'd shoot anywhere from 60 to 90,000 pictures. And you could never have, for instance, Kathy Ireland and Elle McPherson. You couldn't really have two of the supermodels there at the same time because of bruising egos and everything like that. But I remember, I'd go about, my deal with Julie is I wanted it done 1 year in the U.S. or close, and the other year around the globe. We'd go to the Seychelles and to Australia and New Zealand. And so we're in Phuket this time, and we're out on these barrier islands, I'll never forget, off Phuket, and you go to a little restaurant, they'd say, what do you want for dinner today? I would say some fish. They said, oh, we'll go catch it in an hour and you'll have dinner in 5 hours. But that was a great shoot, and some of the stories, which we can't reveal here in a friendly environment, but the girls were great. I mean, the girls were so professional. Kathy Ireland, she's almost a billionaire now with the businesses she runs. She's been married for 35 years or so to a Dr. Greg Olson, I believe his last name is. I mean, they're great people. Elle's married to several billionaires. I think she's between billionaires at the moment. But it was quite a run. But the girls were classy, and we treated them well, and we made a lot of money doing it. Tell
me about Sid Finch.
Sid Finch, when you edit a magazine, Charlie, you're always aware of the issue date. In our case, it was a Monday, and I guess it was at Christmas of 1984. I guess I was at home looking around, figuring out what to do, looking at the year, and I said, oh my gosh, April 1st is a Monday. I said, I've got to do something April Fool's. So I get in the office a couple of days later, and I call Myra Gelband, whose son, by the way, Cameron Wilson, won the NCAA championship 4 or 5 years ago playing for Stanford. Was on the tour, played in 3 Opens by the time he was about 24. Now I think he's out of golf a little bit, getting a master's degree at Johns Hopkins. Anyway, I said to Myra, it's April Fool's, and I want to keep this a big secret. We got to do something. Let's get George. Now, George Plimpton, I had a great relationship. I helped him when he was doing the story on the tour. He had done the great Paper Lion story. I'd set him up to play golf for the Boston Bruins. He wrote a book and a great story about that. I convinced, as he skated onto the ice the first time, I got Bobby Orr to fire a puck right by his head, missed by about an inch. That was a wake-up call for George. Anyway, we got George in, and one thing led to the other, and we talked about various ideas, and George came back about a week later about some idea about some marathon, some Japanese marathoners taking a wrong turn in the London Marathon and ending up in a tunnel or something like that. So I said, George, it's the beginning of the baseball season. Let's put our heads on and come up with something about baseball. A week later, George comes back with the idea of Sid Arthur Finch, which was only brilliant, and we kept that one of the great secrets. The general manager of the Mets, a former newspaper man, Frank Cashin, knew about it, and nobody in the office, 1 or 2 people, a photographer obviously knew about it, but we kept that a great, great secret. And when it came out, of course, it's still considered by everybody maybe the best ever April Fool's story in the history of sports and maybe in the history of anything. ABC News did 7 minutes on the network news saying, we like to do something April 1st, but we're not going to even think about it anymore. And then they did Sid Finch for 7 minutes. Got me in a little bit of trouble because my only boss really was the editor-in-chief, and I was supposed to tell him if we had any surprises, major investigation. I didn't tell him because my real fear was he wasn't a baseball guy. He was a brilliant man who was later ambassador to Austria. He was the editor-in-chief of the whole company, all the magazines. And I figured that he might say, no. So we didn't tell him. And afterwards, he was very appreciative we didn't tell him. And the whole thing worked out. There were a lot of people in Time Inc. who didn't like it when it happened the first 2 days. But once the swerve of public reaction, and George Vesey wrote a brilliant column in the New York Times on Sunday, saying why this was so great for everything. And so it turned out to, so every year on April Fool's Day, I get a handful of calls. This year, a lot more because it was the 35th anniversary. People asking about the story and how it happened and what have you. And it was George's brilliant. George is one of the great craftsmen of any generation, a great, great writer. So that worked.
You took a chance, big chance. It paid off. People bought the 178-mile-an-hour fastball, which is...
That's what Henry Grunwald, the editor-in-chief, said to me when he said about 3 days later. He had been at another time. He had a lot of corporate meetings, and he was at Arizona over the weekend, and we missed connections. I didn't get your call, one of those things. Anyway, and I saw him back in New York Monday or Tuesday. He said, when I saw the ball went 168 miles an hour, I should have figured it out. And I looked at him, Henry, who's an Austrian. I said, Henry, let me tell you something. You don't know whether a basketball goes 100, or 168 miles an hour. He says, you know what? You're right.
Were there any big chances that you took that didn't pay off that you'd share with me?
No, I think we had a pretty good run, Charlie. Every time we did an investigation, that was a big chance. We took on Pete Rose. We took on the academic messes in the NCAA, the cocaine menace that at that time pervaded NFL and various pro sports. I mean, there wasn't anything we didn't take on, really, the doping scandals and everything else like that. But you never went to press without having, your legal people and your fact checkers and everything else, on solid ground. I think the one thing that could have been the scariest of all is our great photographic editor, Heinz Klutmeyer, who unfortunately now is very, very sick. Heinz there was the great Wolfgang Schmidt, who was the East German hammer thrower, broad jump, whatever it was. Great, great athlete. And Heinz and Anita Verschoff, the bar staff, who was also from Germany, were determined to get him out of East Germany. And I said to them, don't get us involved in this. Please. I mean, they were going to do this and that. And, well, all I know is about 6 weeks later on a Sunday night, I get a call from the State Department asking if I knew the whereabouts of Heinz Klutmeyer and Anita Verschoff. I said, well, they were here a few days ago. They said, well, they are right now. They were trying to smuggle Wolfgang Schmidt out of East Germany. They had fake passports. They were on a train. I mean, it was, this could have been the end of everything. And fortunately, it gets smoothed over. He ultimately get out, not that particular day, but Wolfgang Schmidt did get out. But there they are trying to, I mean, that could have been, oh my God. I might be getting out of jail right now because of the,
Well,
but Charlie, you take chances, you write stories. And, I remember doing a Notre Dame story one time. We did a Notre Dame. One of their players came to us talking about he had been told he had to take steroids to bulk up. His brothers played in the NFL, or else he wouldn't play. And we wrote the story. Notre Dame was furious, and in a discussion when they came to New York and talked to me, and to a publisher at the time, Don Barr, I said to him, are you here to talk about the facts in the story or something else? They said, oh, no, we've checked out the facts, and we know what happened, and we'll take care of that. But we're worried about the image of Notre Dame. And I said, that's not my problem. That's not my issue. That's yours, and, you got to figure that out. And then we went and had a nice lunch.
Well, Mark, sports journalism, I think a strong argument can be made. You were at the helm of the most influential magazine at its height. We've seen ESPN do what it's done. Sports on television is one thing, but we seem to be in a total different era now with social media, with so much going on in sports. Where do you see sports journalism going right now in this environment we're in?
It scares the hell out of me, Charlie, because in the old days when you covered baseball, I remember covering the Red Sox back in the early 60s for the Boston Globe. You flew on the plane with the players. They were good friends. I used to write Kurt Gowdy's radio show a lot. You go on the road for 10 days and you get $12 a day meal money. God would say, hey, Bush, you want to write my show for $25? It'd take you about 8 minutes. Kurt Gowdy here with the Red Sox. Charlie Rymer's going to pitch tomorrow. And things like that. And, hold on. Let me get that off. Charlie Rymer is going to pitch tomorrow. For those, he's 6-7. Gosh.
Must be important. Answer it. Who you got calling, Mark?
Charlie, Charlie's sinker's not been working. They hit a lot of home runs, but it take you about 5 minutes. You pick up $25. On a road trip, an extra $250 or $300 was a lot of money. But anyway, we all got along. And then the magazine, what we did. I mean, we were honest journalists. Everybody took. I mean, you look at Bob Lay when he was when he left ESPN. That, to me, that's a big loss. They lost people like that. They lost their serious journalists. And who else just retired? Somebody else, I forget who. But these were the important people, and now you see what's happening. Everybody's got a gig. Everybody's in bed with everybody else. The networks are in bed with all the leagues. They're in with all the conferences, and never has heard a discouraging word about anything. You know what I mean? And you try to watch some of these. We've been stuck in the house here, obviously, with this virus when you're not playing golf, and you see certain things go on, and you say to yourself, what in God's name? How can they? I mean, I watched the show for about an hour this morning, 3 different places on ESPN. They're talking about who would be the better quarterback for the Patriots, Andy Dalton or CJ, what's his name? The kid they cut in North Carolina, in Charlotte. And you're saying to yourself, it's not happening. First of all, no one's ever mentioned the fact that Patriots do not have any money to pay a quarterback. Their salary cap is maxed out. So they're creating these false narratives for an hour. And I'm saying to myself, God, it's exhausting. But I worry about who's going to tell it like it is down the road. And it's scary, really, because I don't see where that's going to happen. I don't see where the networks are going to alienate their leagues, the people within their leagues. And, the old days, I'd want to do a story on you, and I'd say, Charlie, I'm going to come out and want to spend 4 or 5 days with you, take you and Carol to dinner and do some things like that. Now someone said, oh, my God, I can just do this little soundbite on whatever network, Fox or ESPN, Hey, Charlie, how you playing? Gee, I'm playing great. I had a good round today. Thanks. And then you're gone. And there's no probing. There's no questions and things like that. I mean, I can remember back in the 60s when I was doing a lot of work with Jack for the magazine. I was sort of his ghostwriter when he was tied up with the magazine. And, you flew on planes with him. I played golf with Arnold. When I was covering the tour in the 60s, Charlie, Jack Tuthill used to let me play some Monday and Tuesday practice rounds because I was on the tour all the time. I was about as young as the guys. I wore the same type of pants and things like that. And that doesn't happen anymore. That dynamic is totally, totally gone. I remember being in Jack's house one day when Joe Dye called and said they didn't have a field for the tournament up at Philadelphia. I forget the name of it. And Arnold was on the other line. Could one of you go? And I think Arnold said he couldn't go this year, but he'd go the next year. And Jack said, fine, I'll go this year. That doesn't happen anymore. That type of, first of all, that type of contact with the writers. I mean, has anybody ever gotten close to Tiger Woods? I mean, my Lord, And then when Tiger said that time when Dan Jenkins went to his agent and said, I'd like to have dinner with him, and people went to him, and they said, he can't do anything for us. I mean, Dan was the single most important writer of golf for over 50 years, and you don't have time for him? I mean, how many dinners? I mean, I can't count the dinners you'd have with a Nicklaus. I remember being in Hawaii for the Hawaiian Open in, I guess, 69. I think we had dinner every night for a week. It was that type of relationship with people, and those have gone. And I think that sports is the loser as a result because we don't get to know the real people anymore.
Don't you think at its heart it's all about control? The leagues want to have control of their messaging, and as they pursue that control, they don't realize or care that their product becomes more and more bland?
Well, control is the ultimate word involving anything. I mean, in the old days, if I wanted to do a story on Nicholas, for instance, let's pick another. If I want to do a story on you, I would call you. Now you got to go through 2 agents of this and that. By the time you get to somebody, it's important. They don't call back. You missed them. They're doing this. They just pick up the phone. I still have in this phone that I'm telling you, I have back-to-back numbers, Bobby Orr and Arnold Palmer, back-to-back on the quick list. It's funny. I was in the car driving my grandson to a tournament a year ago. And you can pick up the phone and call Arnold. You know that. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at Tommy Mangan in the back seat. I said, what are you doing? He had my cell phone. I thought it was when he says, I'm calling. I said, who are you calling? He says, Arnold Palmer. I said, Tommy's dead, for Christ's sake. Hang up. My fear was that all of a sudden someone would say, hello, because that was Arnold's number. You had those numbers. You could call Jack. That's just a great time. You do a baseball story. You pick up the phone. You go see people. You didn't have to go through agents and booking agents and everything else. And it's, yes, you're right. Everything is under control. It's a control by, put it this way, you have this Michael Jordan thing on right now. It's all over television. I put Michael Jordan on the cover of Sports Illustrated well more than 25 times. He's been on 40 or 50 times or whatever. But in my years of the 600 or so issues I created, he was on the 25. No, he put himself on the cover. Don't make his brilliance. I put him on the cover once playing golf, in a big, my God, he was so tall. The club looked like a little, pencil in his hands and what have you. Saying, golf is my game or something like that. Golf is my new game. I also put him on the cover once. Remember, he's trying to play baseball. He was out of basketball that year.
Mm-hmm. Playing for Birmingham Barons.
Birmingham Barons. Terry Francona, the manager. Anyway, we put him on the cover of the magazine because he couldn't hit his weight. He couldn't hit you or me. And I knew what they were going to do. The White Sox were going to bring him to Chicago, sell the place out for a weekend, put, $8 or $10 million in their pockets and ship them back to Birmingham because some baseball people in high places had said they didn't like this idea. Also, I put him on the cover and said Michael Baggett. That was 1950, 1990, 3, 4, somewhere in there. Now, 25 years later, he has refused to talk to anyone from Sports Illustrated. For 25 years. Did he ever say anything about the 25 or 6, 7 covers that made Gatorade and Nike and everybody else in the NBA, a hell of a lot of money, including Michael? No. One cover, 1 out of 25. That's a batting average, It doesn't get you in the Hall of Fame, put it that way.
Well, Mark, as always, it's great to spend some time with you. I appreciate you sharing some great stories from Sports Illustrated, your opinions on the world of golf. And I look forward to, we haven't played in a while, I look forward when all this is said and done to getting out and playing around the golf sometime soon.
Well, the last time you were down here, of course, you drove down with Holly Saunders, and I don't know that your mind was on golf that much.
Yeah, came to see you at Johns Island right before you brought the USGA Mid-Am there. I believe it was in 2015. And then I think we might have played one time over at Streamsong not long after it opened there in the Orlando area.
Yeah, you had one of the great lines of all time when you stood up there at Streamsong. You looked around for about 400 miles and couldn't see anything. Ladies and gentlemen, they call this place Boom, Florida. And I won't use it.
They got good golf courses there for sure.
Yeah.
Anytime you need a fourth at Pine Valley, let me know. You got my number, Mark. I can get there pretty quick.
Perfect. I look forward to it. You know what I'll do? I got to once it gets going, we'll get Julian up to come up with us too and play one day.
That'd be great. Our good friend Julian Saul, the carpet baron. As long as we're paying his way, he'll be good.
Yeah, we're not having any benefit dances there.
Appreciate your time, Mark. Thank you very much.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Charlie Rymer. We'll see you next time on the Charlie Rymer Golf Show, powered by PlayGolfMyrtleBeach.com.